7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Welcome to Innovating a Game Changer podcast. I'm your innovator, Nevarda Smith, and today we're going to talk about a bunch of topics, and I've got Sean Hirst on the line. Hey, welcome, Sean.
Hey, Nev, how's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. Let's get you up in volume a little bit here so you can hear you. All right. So, how has the week been, man?
It's been production deployments and BlueGreen testing mainly. What about for you?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of innovation with the Alexa skill set. So that's the workload we've been working on this week. My intern has been doing a marvelous job on that stuff. So the development is going along nicely, and we're about to release some information on the product that we're actually doing on that platform, which should come out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, sounds interesting.
Yeah, we've also got a patent that we're putting together for that one, so that's being submitted, and hopefully we get the patent pending on that, and then eventually, hopefully, it'll turn into a full patent on that one.
Is that the patent just for the voice recognition, or just the reply?
It's the way it's integrating with a piece of technology that we're dealing with. So nobody else is doing it right now. So that's what we're leaning towards. I'm also doing a lot of work with Alexa on DocSnap as well. So there's some cool features that we're implementing from a DocSnap perspective.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
So talk to me a little bit about the BlueGreen and why that's so important.
So with this new product, we're going into Pivotal Cloud Foundry and doing BlueGreen deployment, and that gives you the ability to deploy during the day, so you can have like 20 and 30 releases without interrupting a customer. And the way it does it is you push your code to Blue, and it's contacting back-end production services or whatever you need to connect to, and you do your what's called candidate release, and you would test everything just like you're in production, using production data or production credentials, whatever you're doing. And then within 8 seconds, you can swap the containers, the doc containers, and then you're in production without any interruption.
So let me ask you on that. So what does the final deployment? Who makes that decision, and what tool do you use to actually say yes, do it?
The final deployment is up to the what we call the business product owner, BPO, and they're the ones that actually go into production and do the testing with whatever data they have. And then once they sign off, currently we're using Jenkins. It's just a button in Jenkins. They get a link in an email and a button in Jenkins that they proceed, and then in 6 to 8 seconds later, it's in production. You can do it other ways. We were prior going to use ServiceNow links in an email to tell them the Jira. It's linked to the Jira item or whatever you're using for your backlog. And then they know what it is, what it's for, what they're testing. And then as soon as they hit the go to production, it takes about 8 seconds and they're in production.
So UAT, user acceptance testing, is where that happens on the Blue side. Is that right?
Yeah, we call it Blue testing, but old school UAT testing is what you call it back then. But they basically have the ability to go right to production that day, midday, whatever time of the day they will need to go. And one of the keys to that, one of the other teams found out, we had our front ends, React front ends, trying 5 times if it got a failure within a 30-second time period. That way, when your container goes over, you're not going to see any blip for that 8 seconds. It's going to continue trying, and it just tells you, the front end user just sees the spinner or whatever your load is. And then once the container spins up, it's good to go, and then it'll hook back up to the new stuff.
So before you actually joined this particular company, how were they doing deployments? Just normal waterfall?
Yeah, they were waterfall model using WebSphere and moving packages manually and stuff like that. And there was people already there starting to spin up PCF and DevOps and getting Jenkins integrated, Artifactory, Git, all of that stuff integrated. And now we're one of the first teams to go out into production with it.
How big is your team?
We have 12 developers onshore, and then about 18 offshore, but we're slowly going to the internal model, so that variance will change over a period of time.
So all those guys are on DevOps, or are those developers and DevOps? And I really want to focus in on the DevOps piece.
Those developers are actually on the platform side of it, so they're doing the React front end and the Spring Java middle layer that takes care of all the back end calls while maintaining a static front end for the front end's mobile and website, so that they don't see any changes. If the back end changes, the front end never has an impact.
Right. So, and how many people, how many DevOps people are actually working on this? Then, how long did it take to get you from the old waterfall manual movement process into where you're at today?
It's been about a year. There's the team that runs CI/CD, the DevOps stuff. There's only about 4 or 5 of them. They really set up stuff and go in. And the main problem isn't the technology or the people. The main problem is getting the understanding across the organization of what is DevOps, how does it work, what do you mean you can go to production blue and not affect anything outside, what do you mean we can deploy during the day, and really getting past the bureaucracy of the problems. That's the main holdup in any of step of this is getting an understanding across the organization, because every human is afraid of new things unless you're adept to dive into them. So that was been the main holdup. We could probably stand it up in 4 to 5 months if you have the backing and the leadership up front to make the decisions right away and cut right to the chase.
Yeah, I think I hear it, and you're going to production 20 times a day, or the possibility of going to production 20 times a day. That's pretty scary from a business standpoint, because they're typically used to issues going on with every single release, and then at the end of the cycles, especially on a waterfall, having to go into those negotiations. Well, we're not going to get all the work done. What features can we miss, and which one should go forward? And I think that's mainly because the developers themselves aren't spending time on development. They're spending much of their time packaging this stuff together and doing builds and then pushing it to environments, and so lots of injection of errors go on at that side. So I think that's what the business is used to normally, and now you're saying to me, I'm pushing to production ready 20 times a day. I'm a bit scared there. So what do you do to try to help them to understand that there's not going to be the issues that you normally see here?
So one of the main hurdles you have is explaining to them that it's iterative development, meaning you're changing a color here, you're changing a button here, you're changing CSS here, you're deploying a small dormant service here that you can turn on whenever you're ready. It's iterative, so your story point sizes should never be larger than a 2. If they are, you need to break that down into sections of code that you're going to deploy that would integrate with your TDD. And then you would turn it on once the whole thing is there, and really break things down. Everybody still has that old mentality of large pushes, but you're actually doing iteratively daily small pushes. And usually developers will take 6 to 8 stories, and they'll just iteratively take those small stories, build their test scripts, and then code to those test scripts small portions a day. But they're checking in every couple hours, and that goes straight to the production blue side. It goes QA, goes build, test, QA, then production blue. And then once the feature is fully there, the business product owner can sign off and hit the button and go.
So on the QA cycle, you talked about test-driven development, TDD. So how do you, number one, enforce test-driven development? Number two, what's the size of the QA team, and what are they spending their time on, manual or automation testing?
So, and you really transition from a manual testing team to a test script building team. So when you think of the developers, they're doing their unit test building, and they're doing Cucumber and Gherkin scripts to get those set up for the more front end type testing. You should automate as much testing as humanly possible across the whole functions of the app. That way, when something's checked in, if it fails any of those tests, it will fail the build, and then everybody, nothing goes in until you fix the build, right? So how you enforce it is you have tasks that are built to the story, and the first task is to build the test scripts and check those into the pipe. and they have to pass those pipe. Now, one thing that you're going to run into is quality of the test scripts, and in order to force that, you really have to have others code reviews across the team. So whenever a lead checks in, you'll have 3 other developers check it, make sure it's not just a true false scenario. It's got to be the actual functionality testing for their unit tests and then their Gherkin and Cucumber scripts as well. And those get fired at the beginning of the pipe as soon as check-in before it even goes into QA environment. That way you have, trust across the team, and there's also checks and balances between the teammates so that they get used to each other, and it's okay if you break my code or I break your code with my test scripts and or the code that I'm checking in.
Do you find that typical developer coming into that environment gets kind of upset that they're now coding tests up front rather than doing actual development work? It seems there's going to be some pushback there as well.
Yeah, there is going to be pushback, but for adding 35% of your time, it takes about 25 to 35% more time to do these test scripts. But over the period of time, you save 68% on stats of the ability of downtime, bad code check-ins, environmental issues, all those things that you're missing if you did not do TDD. So the benefits way outweigh over a timeline to do TDD upfront. And to get the whole function. That way you have a whole suite of testing. That way as soon as something gets checked in, if the pipeline breaks, that code broke it versus, oops, we deployed into a environment and now it's there and now we got to fix it. Versus, it's already never got deployed because it never passed all the tests.
So I guess a developer that's pretty seasoned that comes into this environment can see that after a couple of cycles. Though I guess the new developers would be used to that from the get-go, right?
Yeah, they wish more and more newer developers are used to that type of mentality, and it's really being taught more. I've found, and as CI/CD and this faster mentality, faster mentality goes out, you'll see more and more developers do that. I think it's. You protect yourself by building those test scripts. You're no longer the one that checked in code and then found out about it 5 days later in an environment that you broke it. It's more, I'm protected by checking in this code. I protect myself. That way, if it breaks, then it's no big deal. It doesn't go into the environments. It's more of a getting used to it and a mind shift, a paradigm shift for the developers. And once they get used to it and they have all that set up, they no longer have to worry about, am I going to check in at the end on a Friday and break something? It doesn't matter. It'll break the build, and then you just revert back and you just go home for the day. You don't have to worry about, I checked in code. Did that break anything overnight or over the weekend? You'll never have that situation anymore.
Sounds like there's a couple of tips there, right? So it's a culture change, and what would be other? Let's say the first one is the culture change, getting the driven down. You talked also about getting probably executive level support to push down into the organization to say that they're ready for DevOps. What would be your third top tip?
Third top tip is really give your developers the tools they need. I've worked at several organizations, as you know, and there's ones that give the developers the tools they need. And then the leeway they need, meaning the administrative rights to their laptops, or clear listing the apps they need and clear listing the connections they need to make sure they stay up to date. If you don't give a carpenter the good tools to do what he needs to do for your house, you wouldn't expect the job to be done right. So you need to make sure that your developers are given the right tools, given the tools they need, they ask for, and that the responsibility for that is put on the team, because you go into DevSecOps, which is security operations in DevOps, and really the security is pushed down to the team, and your security team becomes more of an advisement and education team. That way, when they have those tools, they can develop at the speed they need to push to market. It's all about speed now, and the ability to push those new features, get those out quickly. And in order to do that, you need to give them the right tools to do it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've discussed in the past, which is really moving that security layer down to the development area, pushing it all the way to the left, and the importance of that. because in the cycle, we'll go through today at the organization that I'm at. Security comes in the last 2 weeks. They do a scan, and all of a sudden we've got all that feedback, and that feedback will typically go to someone like an Edwin, right, who's been on our team before, because we know he's going to be able to fix those security vulnerabilities very, very quickly. But that doesn't help the developers who built the code wrong in the first place. So you keep seeing that same security vulnerability coming up over and over again because you never get the ability to train the developer. Whereas when you push security all the way down to the left, that developer checks in, they're going to get that feedback immediately saying you've just injected, you've done SQL injection or you've done these other vulnerabilities. Go ahead and fix it, and it gives that ability to get that feedback, get that training going back in, and a code quality goes through the roof. How many cycles do you think it takes to typically get people start to think about development in a security mindset versus, that's somebody else's problem at the end?
Well, so when you integrate a tool like checkmarks in the beginning of the build and test cycle, and they have that and they see that, and then when you turn on the failure of the build, if it meets a medium or higher scan, then the build fails. It's almost an immediate reaction. They're like, oh, well, I did something, and then they can click. It takes one click, and they can see exactly what code did it, where it was, and then the tool gives them feedback on how to fix it, what it means, and the understanding. And then if they still don't understand, they can take that report and they can go to your security team, is your advisement team, and they become more tactical to answer questions and be there when they need them. They take it to them and say, hey, how can I fix this? And that way they get the fast feedback loop they need, and they can go ahead and fix it and check right back in. Usually it's something that they can fix fairly quickly if they know how. And that adoption usually happens as soon as you turn on the build failure in your pipeline of a medium or lower, medium or higher gets failed as a build. They get the immediate feedback, and they have to fix it, otherwise their code doesn't make it in, and they don't make their task if you're doing Kanban, or their sprint if you're doing regular Scrum.
Yeah, that's something that's really important. I talk a lot about the customer value and getting that feedback loop from the customer. This is the same from a development standpoint, is getting that feedback from these tools to make you a better developer. So I think that's really, really important. It's probably one of the places that I'd start is actually, if you're on your journey to DevOps, one of the first places I'd start is to get a tool like Checksmarks and move that down into the development cycle. The next thing I'd follow up with is, of course, test-driven development, and then just start wrapping this stuff in piece by piece. It is a long journey, though, as far as moving from a pure waterfall or even an agile environment into one that's where the build automation is actually telling you all these issues with your code. So you got to take your time. You got to get your executive level support, and you got to push that down into the team. I think it's one of the best things you can do, especially in innovation. We have to be able to innovate quickly, get prototypes out very, very quickly. So we don't want to introduce any vulnerabilities when we're going to pilot, and that's one of the things that we try to do in the group for the innovation stuff, is actually make sure that the DevOps is the first thing that we innovate versus moving on to something else like a brand new piece of functionality, because it does you no good if you're going to spend 12 months trying to build something because you don't have the tools to support yourself.
Yep.
So, any last minute thoughts? I think we're at the 20-minute mark, so I'll shut it down now. Besides double pits to chesty.
No, I'm good. Double pits to chesty is the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, exactly. So if you like what you're hearing, guys, I please subscribe and share this information with your colleagues. We're going to continue to talk about things in this way and provide this feedback. Any comments you want to leave below as well to talk about future topics, that's fantastic. So this has been Innovating a Game Changer. I'm your innovator, Nevarda Smith, and we've been talking with Sean Hirst.